Hello, everyone, and welcome to Event Icons, where you get a chance to chat with the icons of the event industry. I'm Brant Kruger, and today we're being joined with a couple of guests. We're going to be talking about Braindates with Kristine, Renaud and Sophie Silkes from E180. What happens when you use technology to connect attendees at events? And is traditional networking dead? We're going to find out about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Event Icons.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of #EventIcons.
Presented by Endless Events.
The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. Use the question panel on the webinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter. Submit your questions with #EventIcons.
We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show.
Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share #EventIcons on Twitter and Facebook.
Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com.
Now, without any further delay, this is #EventIcons.
Okay, everybody, welcome. We are going to be talking about Braindates today. We've got Kristine Renaud. Kristine is the CEO and co-founder of E180, a B corporation created in Montreal with a mission to reinvent the way humans learn across the world. So, just a little, easy mission. To do so, E180 created Braindate, a concept used, among others, by a few folks you might have heard of: Airbnb, Amazon, C2 Montreal, the Festival de l'Inde de Cannes, and TED. How was my terrible French accent on that? To generate more collaborative and peer learning among participants and employees. Kristine is a graduate from Harvard Graduate School of Education, co-founder of Technovation Montreal, and was named the Female Entrepreneur of the Year in Quebec by Startup Canada. Hello, Kristine.
Hi, good to be here.
Welcome to the show. And sitting next to you is Sophie Silkes. Sophie is the Marketing and Communications Director of E180. She loves to use her marketing and communication skills to propel organizations and businesses with transformative potential forward, which is what she's been up to at E180 since 2017. Welcome, Sophie.
Hello.
All right. Well, we always like to start the show with some softballs before we get into the heavy-duty stuff of brain dating and networking and all that kind of stuff. So, Kristine, what got you into the events industry? And if you weren't in the events industry, what would you be doing instead?
Wow. Okay. I don't know if it's a softball, but I really landed in the event industry by chance. So I'm a teacher. I was trained as a teacher, and I wanted to reinvent, as you said so well, the way that people learn throughout the world. So I wanted to create an alternative school, which is still a project that we have here at E180. So we created the technology called Braindate to connect people so that they can learn from each other. But at the beginning, people were learning from each other in coffee shops. So it was very similar. People would put on knowledge that they would like to share with other human beings, but they would meet actually face-to-face in coffee shop to share knowledge on relevant topics for them. And it's actually C2 Montreal who approached us, so a big event here in Montreal about creativity and business, who approached us to know if we would like to do their B2B technology. And we said, well, we do peer learning, and they was like, oh, we're way too hippie for our crowd, so that won't work. And finally it worked, and that was my first steps in the event industry, but now it's been 7 years.
And what would you be doing instead?
I would be doing what I'm doing at the same time, which is creating a school, thinking about the future of Braindates for the whole world, writing books. So I'm doing it all.
I don't know. I think that might be cheating to say I'd be doing what I'm doing. All right. Sophie, how about you?
I was actually working in event planning previously, but still doing marketing and communications at a spot called Crew here in Montreal. So it's a historic site in kind of the old city, and it was a repurposed bank, and we were using it to host events, have kind of a community space and a cafe and a co-working space. So I was doing all of our marketing and comms and also event planning, and then realized that I wanted to focus more on the communication side of things. And so came just a bit further north in the city to join these guys.
And what would you be doing if you hadn't gotten into the events industry?
I don't even really think of us sometimes as events. Yeah, it's funny. This is like my daily struggle. I start and I'm like, I'm a comms person. I'm like, I work in the events industry. I think I'm excited about what we're doing because I think we help people at events kind of forget that they're there sometimes in a good way. We just take out the best part of it. So I really like this type of work in comms in the events industry. So it would be something related to communications, but getting to travel and meet people by going to lots of places is awesome.
All right. Well, we want to take this time to remind everyone that might be joining us live to put your questions for Sophie and Kristine in the chat roll there at event-icons.com, or drop it into the comments on Facebook, or you can also reach us at the hashtag EventIcons on Twitter. So drop your questions in there as we go along, and we'll be sure to feed them to these guys. In the meantime, before we get into, kind of your take on networking, what does more traditional networking look like currently at a conference compared to, well, let's just leave it at that. We'll get to the comparison soon enough.
Yeah, I think it's a very uncomfortable place for most of us. And oftentimes we hear from people who consider themselves introverts, they will say, like, you kind of saved my life, because my worst nightmare is to, hold on to my glass of wine and walk in a room and hoping to find my meaningful stranger. Like, there's nothing in the world that scares me more than that. But then when you talk to even like outgoing people, like I think I am, it's not fun for anyone to have to go through a room of 200 people hoping that you'll find, the conversation that will make this whole event worthwhile for you. So I think the lack of intentionality plus the lack of meaning of current networking. And if we talk about networking being like cramming 200 people in a room hoping that they will find some value in that situation, like that's what I see as networking right now. And I think sometimes it works because it's serendipity and it happens, but I think that there is a way to bring way more value when you gather people at an event or in a room.
Can that more traditional style, does that work for some events at least? Or is it just broken?
I think we always say with E180 that, what we do is, and maybe I can get to a point where I actually really explain like the way that the technology works and everything.
Absolutely,
but,
yep.
We'll get there. So we do knowledge sharing, we do peer learning, and we always say that networking will be a side benefit of having a very meaningful, intentional conversation with somebody that shares interests with you. So it's not that networking is not relevant, but when you place networking first and you think that just by getting people in a room, something magical will happen, well, sometimes it does, and more oftentimes it doesn't. And when people at events ask for that, when they ask for more networking, they don't mean from more very uncomfortable situations, but they want more meaningful conversations with the right people. So the question is, how can we create this context for our participants? And it's usually not just by cramming them in. And of course, having cocktails and having a good time is great, but it's probably greater when people actually already know each other and feel at home and feel safe than when they arrive at a place where they don't know anybody.
Well, it's always easier to have a conversation in a social situation with people that versus completely cold, coming in out of nowhere conversation. Yeah. It's just because you've already made a connection of some kind. So if that's the way that things are being traditionally done, let's get into it. So what is the definition of this Braindate that you're talking about, and how does it work?
Sure. So basically, we started, as I was saying, by helping people to uncover their own knowledge and phrase it in a way that they can put it on a web platform. So people would simply phrase their knowledge. It could be about, okay, I went around the world on a sailboat with my family and I can share my knowledge on how you can do that. Or I started my fintech company. I can give you a hand if you're looking for a business model. So it was like various topics were there. So people would put their own knowledge and then browse the topic marketplace to find a great conversation and go in a coffee shop and have that conversation. So that's called a brain date. It's the actual conversation you'll have one-on-one with somebody to learn something from them or share your knowledge. So it worked, as I was saying, it worked pretty well in coffee shops, but the fact that, you know, on any given Wednesday night, you have maybe your daughter, your wife, your husband, your triathlon, your project that you want to complete. So it's not top priority for you to probably go and have coffee with a stranger at 6 o'clock at night, not knowing if this person will show up, not knowing if they will have anything interesting to say. So when we were approached by some members of the event industry to say, well, would you do this with us? It was kind of a no-brainer, because when you go to an event, as you know, you are pretty captive. So you're maybe, you know, thousands of miles or at least hundreds of miles away from home, and you're dedicated to learning new stuff and meeting new people. So the brain date is both the technology, so the kind of topic marketplace that you will browse and where you will book your brain dates, but it's also that meeting that you have with another person to share knowledge. Would you add anything?
I think you got it.
Okay, thank you.
So why brain date? Why not? It's just a meeting or networked connection. What's the philosophy behind calling it that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the story of the name is actually, I was waiting in the speaker's line at South by Southwest because I was on a panel. And at that time, you know, the company is called E180, and the product at that time was also called E180. And we were doing one-on-one knowledge sharing meetups. So anytime somebody would ask me, so what do you do? Like, what is your technology? What is your company? Well, we want to help people learn from each other. So we help them to book one-on-one knowledge sharing meetups. And it's very long, not sexy at all. And I was in that speaker's line, and I was telling the dude there what I was doing. And I was like, you know, it's kind of a dating site. Like, you have an online profile, but what you want is actually go offline and meet somebody to share your knowledge. And he said, oh, okay, kind of like a brain date. And I was like, yeah. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Now it's trademarked. This poor guy will never know he was the spark to help me find how to describe what we do in one simple word, but that's what it is. It's simply that moment where you sit and meet somebody to have a meaningful conversation, but around knowledge sharing and not finding the love of your life.
Okay. So in the context of events, how does that work then? So you had said that, kind of the initial concept was, okay, I have knowledge on subject X. Whoever wants to meet with me about that, great. And does it kind of work in the same way, or how does it tweaked in order to work in events?
Yeah, it's very similar, where basically before the event, we work with our partners, our clients, to help them to build an engagement strategy. And maybe we can talk about that strategy a bit later. And then we invite, all the participants to an event to go on the platform to think about what is the unique experience or knowledge that I have that could be beneficial for other people. So we really believe that any participant to an event has something unique, either like a failure or a success, a life story to share that could propel somebody else. So they will post that, what we call topic on the platform, on the technology. And then everybody else can browse all the topics and then decide who they would like to have a conversation with, so a brain date with. They will book that brain date, and once they arrive on site, they will go to their keynote, to their workshops, but they will also have in their agenda all their booked brain dates. They will arrive on site and go to the Brain Date Lounge, where our learning concierge will welcome them, connect them to their counterpart, and then they will go and have their brain date on site. Do you have anything to add maybe on how we build the knowledge, the
engagement? Yeah, and also it can be in a small group as well as one-on-one, which I think some people like to use, so that you can meet a couple folks at once. And yeah, the engagement piece is kind of a fun, creative, and super important component of having this be a success at each event. We kind of think of this in terms of what problem to solve is a given event community focusing on for the specific iteration of the event, and then we'll tailor our communication strategy in conjunction with the team that we're working with to kind of frame their and our communications around how brain data and how kind of the collective intelligence of this event can help individuals solve whatever problem they're kind of coming to the event to learn more about, or even within the event organizers themselves, if they're thinking about, for example, resolving power dynamics within their communities. Braindates can be positioned as a great way to kind of level the playing field and help kind of folks that would normally not feel so vulnerable share something that might make them learn something new from someone else, or feel like they're in a new position, learning from somebody who otherwise they might not have been able to.
So who actually winds up setting up the Braindates? Who's making the decisions behind the scenes and matching people up?
So it's all about participants. So we do have a matchmaking algorithm that will suggest what we think are the most relevant people for you based on your search history and other factors. But at the end of the day, it's not, the technology deciding for you who you should be meeting. You browse and you decide what's relevant for you, because honestly, like in the duration of an event, what we can actually be sure about in terms of what you want and who you are is so limited, because the time frame is so small that even though we want to expose you to what we think are the best people and the best topic for you, we definitely leave it up to the participants to decide for themselves what is relevant in their life.
And that's kind of what I wanted to get at is that there's an algorithm that's helping maybe curate the list a bit, but
Right.
Ultimately it's the attendee themselves that's making the decision. Oh, I want to meet that person and talk about that topic. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So now how about the host? So I'm putting on an event and I'm going to be hosting this thing. What is the process for me as the host of the event?
So Sophie mentioned it a little bit, but the first thing we want to do is to understand, you as a host, you don't want Braindates to be successful. That's not your goal. That's my goal. Your goal is to, for example, help newbies to feel more welcome, because it's an historical event and there's a really strong community, and it's really hard for new people coming in to, make their place and be heard. So that's your problem. Braindates can be leveraged to support you in solving that challenge. So the first thing we do is understanding exactly why you're coming to us. What is it that you are trying to achieve that maybe you were not successful at in the past, and how can knowledge sharing and community building help? So we provide a technology, but we consider ourselves more learning designers and experienced designers, where the technology just supports the experience and the community that we want to create based on what the host will share with us. And once we understand that, then we build the engagement strategy, then we build the on-site strategy, we build the messaging with our clients, and we have other tactics so that the platform is very vibrant. I think that's what differentiate us from other people in this sphere of networking app, is that our goal is not to sell technologies. Our goal is to connect people so that they can learn from each other. We're a double bottom line company. We're a B Corp. We are focusing on impact. So if I sell a technology that nobody uses, I'm not fulfilling my life's mission. That's not what I want to do with my life. So we're really dedicated to make sure that the technology will actually be used to transform lives and to help people to, be propelled by each other's presence and knowledge.
How much do you guys get involved in helping, kind of helping along that implementation? Because like you said, if you just buy the shiny technology and then you're not actively promoting it to the audience and helping them put it together, how much do you guys get involved in that process?
And I think, to add to something you just said, I think also that we start with a trust deficit, because as we were talking about a little bit before we started the show, most networking apps don't work. It's very rare that you will go to an event and be like, oh my God, like I met the people I wanted to meet. It's like they changed my life, and that you tweet about your networking app on Twitter. Like, it's very rare, because it doesn't really work very well for the most part. So we start with that deficit of trust. We have to prove to people that we're different and that we're actually going to bring them amazing results. So that's what we're trying to do in the whole process, in combination with the client.
You bring up a fantastic point. I mean, and that is, I'll be honest with you, I've tried these these kind of networking algorithmic products at at certain events, and it's like, oh yeah, and you have to punch in all your own your personal information or connect your LinkedIn profile and all this kind of stuff. And then on the one that I'm thinking of, I got connected to like the head of marketing for that app company, and the vice president for that app company. And so it's like, wow, that's great. I would never have met you guys otherwise. Thanks so much. That. So it's good to hear that you guys are putting so much effort on the front end to make sure that you're understanding the goals of the event and keeping those very separate from the goals of the app of the Braindate connection itself. How do you help the planner that comes to you guys and says, I just heard Braindates on EventIcons and it sounded cool, so I think we should do it. Rather than having, how do you help them kind of find those goals of what they actually want to accomplish with the technology?
Yeah, well, I think it comes from guiding a conversation with them as we jump into the partnership to kind of help identify those challenges that we were mentioning earlier. Because very rarely, I think, will somebody say, oh, I want a networking solution because I just want networking. It's really like, oh, I want my people to leave feeling more connected to each other, feeling like they have learned something new, feeling like they overcame a challenge. Like there's another level of nuance, and I think our expertise is coming into and guiding that conversation with a lot of intentionality right from the get-go with our partners to make sure that this intention that we can kind of collectively identify really guides the whole experience.
And it's interesting because I think, and I don't want to talk for like whole industry, but I think that the difference also is that we see our client also as a trampoline.
Like a jumping off point.
A jumping off point or a
platform. Yeah.
A trampoline. English is not my first language. Sometimes there's words I don't know. But we also see trampoline. Yes, we also see our client as a leverage for our own mission. So it's not just like, okay, I'm an entrepreneur and I want to build a business. What do I know? Where can I make money? Oh, I think networking at events is a great place for me to start. Like that was never and not that it's a bad thing, but it was never the path that we took. It was more like we have this mission, where can it best be propelled? Oh, events. People are captive. They want to learn. They want to meet people. It's a perfect place for us to thrive. So I think that passion for event come from the fact that it's very coherent and synergetic with our own mission. And that's why we care so much, for their own success is that they propel ours as well.
Oh, I mean, so I wanted to ask in there, if someone does come to you and says, our goal is for networking, like literally that's the goal. It's not about a transfer of knowledge. It's not about helping newbies or something like that. Is that something you guys are still able to do, or is that kind of start to get out of your zone and you're like, well, if that's all you want?
No, it's a bit like I said earlier. What does it mean? What does that mean, networking? Because for most people, networking means collecting business cards. But if you don't have a relationship behind that business card is meaningless. It has absolutely no value. So like, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm not worried, I'm not scared of talking about money or talking about, getting clients. Like, it's something essential when you're an entrepreneur. But I can tell you that my most fruitful business relationships are relationships that I really care for, that I enjoy and love working with. It's people who I sent, the pictures of my baby when she was born 3 months ago. Like, these are amazing clients. It's the people that you have that deep connection with. And networking in the way that you usually think about it, which is to collect as many business cards as possible, won't lead you to a place where you develop those deep and meaningful and mutual relationships. So for me, it's not that networking is bad. It's just like, I don't really know what it means. I don't really know. And when people come to us and they talk about networking, that's where we push. You know, it's like, oh, you mean collecting business cards? Nobody means that. Nobody wants their people to leave with as many business cards as possible. They want their people to leave with as many meaningful relationships as possible. And the truth of the matter is, you cannot develop in a 2 days event, you know, like 50 meaningful relationships. But anyway, even if you collected those 50 business cards, maybe 2 or 3 of them will actually lead to something meaningful. So why don't just focus on those relationships and connections from the get-go?
It's kind of like the same with trade shows, right? There's some people who feel like I need to get, you know, hey, look, I came back from the trade show with 200 cards, but how many of those cards are actually leads, you know, and not just someone who wanted to get the free squishy ball, you know, as you walk by.
Take the card from and scan it without noticing.
Exactly. So it helps, so it can help kind of tease some of those relationships out, it sounds like, rather than just purely connecting people.
Exactly.
So, all right, we've got the host has got it taken care of. We brought you in, we figured out what the goals of the event are. Now we're really looking, and maybe this is the stuff that Sophie can expound upon, you know, how are we really getting that ultimate buy-in from the participants? How are we getting them, you know, really involved and cooking? You know, you mentioned the concierge. I'm assuming that happens to be a big part of it. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so the learning concierge are folks that are on site who are helping to host people to facilitate this experience in person. A lot of people receive emails that basically be the recipient of a piece of the engagement strategy and might still need the on-site in-person explanation to really help them feel their personal connection to it. So again, this engagement strategy that we come up with together with our partners is really tailored to kind of be delivered in the type of voice and tone that will be resonant with the community that we're working within. So that's kind of where that it becomes less of a leap of faith for participants to kind of put themselves out there and, like you were describing, kind of fill out a bit of a profile and have it be a personal experience. So if there's trust established by speaking in a language that feels comfortable and feels at the right level of formality, then that's, in our experience, the most effective way to kind of kick off this relationship, this touch point with the participants. So it's a good combination of a lot of pre-event engagement communications and then the on-site presence, of course, which makes a really big difference.
And I would add that something we leverage when it's available is people who have experienced Braindates, because, you know, we talk about it and we talk about it a lot with our clients and with people that we will end up working with and people we don't. And we definitely notice that once you've had yourself an amazing transformative conversation with another human being and you have this moment where somebody you don't know actually propelled you with their own knowledge, it's kind of an act. And I don't want to be falsely humble, but we hear from our participants, you know, that it is really transformative, and not just for the knowledge itself, but even for the way that you perceive your own learning throughout your days and throughout your life. Once you realize that the people around you are an amazing source of support and knowledge and experience, then you end up having brain dates all the time. You know, you end up like soliciting people and are also contributing to other people's life on a daily basis. But until you experience that for yourself, maybe what we're talking about is just networking. You know, it's just that thing that is kind of like that black box. So when we in, you know, the client's team, for instance, have somebody that has experienced brain date in another event, or a participant that experienced it last year and was truly transformed by it, having them talk about their experiences also very, very, very rich for us and for other attendees to understand what we do and the value of it.
Well, it sounds like not just the experience, but also the experience of working with your folks on site, you know, definitely contribute significantly. One of the hosts of the show here experienced one of your brain date sessions at MPI's The Event, and she found that the creation of the 2 showcase rooms and the combination of that with the warm hosting by the Braindates team made it, what in her words, a better than average experience on top of the actual meeting time. It strikes me as something that is actually would be something that would be pretty easy to sponsor. Is that the case? Does that happen quite often?
Yes, it is. It is, and it's something that we're very aware of. Is our services are not accessible for all events, especially not the smaller ones. So we're always, and we're working really hard right now actually to bring our price point lower and to make sure that we can be more accessible to smaller events, but even to community leaders that have like what could be seen as meetups or smaller like monthly gathering. So we're going back with the product to a structure that would allow for those community leaders to have access to the work we do. We want to have millions of Braindate within the next couple of years, so we have to be more accessible.
And I think that MPI was a great example too of a sponsorship, a great partnership that we had with Tourism Winnipeg.
Oh, yeah.
So we can be really creative. I mean, it's like kind of a dream kind of experience to sponsor, just because you can be really flexible with the type of involvement you want to have. And they were really interested in helping to encourage people to participate in Braindate, so ended up raffling off plane tickets, and it felt very creative and very fruitful in that way. So we're excited to work with folks like that.
And also because you have a way to leverage your own people and your own knowledge in a very creative way. So instead of just having a logo on our platform, you can also have humans, and they can be present and they can showcase their expertise, and we can connect them with the participants in a way that a logo can't. So I think it's not to overuse the word meaningful, but I think it's definitely a meaningful sponsorship.
I think you hit on a very key point there. I mean, a lot of times we see in sponsorship opportunities, sponsors are given the opportunity to speak in a breakout session or something along those lines. So something very similar could be here, where they're kind of added to the pool of available Braindates and may have some important knowledge that attendees might want to deal with. Want to take a quick moment to remind folks to please drop your questions into the chat at event-icons.com or on Facebook or on Twitter, and we'll get them to our guests. And we do actually have a question coming in from Reed. Reed, a frequent viewer of the show, good to see you, Reed, wants to know more about the success rate of Braindate. So I would imagine that has to do quite a bit varying on what the goals of the event are. But if you could talk a little bit about what, maybe give some ideas of what some people's goals were and how you were able to measure that success.
Do you want to take that one?
Maybe I'll bounce it to you. I think your framing of it is proper, because it varies from, depending on the segment essentially, and the size of the event and the goal and that intention and kind of what portion of the event, if it's not everybody. It's difficult to kind of have one like standard quantitative benchmark. So this is always kind of actually a favorite question of ours, I think, because we kind of look at I see you drawing a funnel, so I'll pass to Kristine to talk about this, but the way we kind of begin to measure things, it depends really largely essentially on the type of audience that we're working with and what year that we're in, particularly with the partnership as well.
I think I think I agree with you. Across the board, I think that measure of success for us is if the event felt more like a community. And some events are a community, and some events think they are a community, but they're just a group of people coming together once a year. And when we look on Twitter or the Learning Concierge, see that people felt that the Braindate Lounge was a safe space, that they've had meaningful conversations that they wouldn't have had if we were not there. For us, that's how we see the success on site. It's those vibrant Braindate Lounge where people, are like that body language of being like fascinated or interested or engaged in a conversation, like that's visually what we see in the Braindate Lounge. In terms of metrics, I would say the challenge that we have is that our hands are kind of tied with what is brought to us by the event, by our client. So we cannot get people in the app ourselves, basically. The engagement strategy and all the ideas that we can share with the clients, if the client is not passing on or exposing the participants to the message that this conference is not just about expert talking to you, but also to you talking to each other, and to turn around and talk to the person sitting next to you, because she or he might be as insightful as the person on stage. We cannot get that message to participants. It has to be the host of the event who does that. So if for one reason or another, because lack of time, because even lack of trust, or the fear of this maybe not working out, and the host won't put all their energy behind Braindates, if we just get 10% of the participants in the app, well, there's just so much we can do, like we won't be able to have 70% engagement if we just have 10% of people coming in. So that collaboration is also a huge criteria for success for us. If we are really tight in our collaboration, and if the collaboration with our client is based in trust, and that back and forth on understanding each other's input in terms of their culture and our expertise, then we get to like outstanding results. But it's that bringing people in, the conversion funnel, as we say in technology, is just not something we can do by ourselves.
Yeah. So once again, you're having to work very closely with the organizer to make sure, that it's being promoted properly, and that you're, doing everything that they can do to get people to participate. I'm going to take another shot here can you think of an example where it was considered a success? What were the goals of that event? And then, for the planner, for the event themselves, what were the goals of that particular event, and how were they able to measure and decide that it was a success afterward?
Particular events. Well, we had an amazing event. Can we talk about it? I'm not sure anymore which one of the events we can talk about.
Maybe not that
Yeah,
one.
you don't have to name names. You can maybe give us an idea of again what they were trying to get out of it, and how they felt that they did get out of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'm thinking about SaaSter, which is a great example of a SaaS, like a software as a service focused event. When I don't recall what our exact kind of the percentage was of our the kind of anticipated engagement rate that we had in mind. But essentially as we continued to iterate on our engagement strategy, we started with these are a couple ideas that we'd like to implement. Let's do, a combination of an email, a social media outreach. We have, a couple of champions in the community that we're trying to tap in. And then eventually, as we were approaching the event, I think our numbers were beginning to rise, but perhaps not at the rate that we had anticipated. And we ended up just going with a strategy of like simple, clear social media outreach from the CEO of the organization, which was kind of the ultimate vote of confidence, and I think is a great example of one engagement strategy that's almost always quite effective. And so as soon as we kind of had this outreach from Jason, we saw a huge increase in participants engaging with the experience actually on site once the event started. And I think it was probably around 30-35% rate of folks that went on Braindates. But I think what really kind of hit home and struck the organizers as being something that was really impressive was not just that people were going on these Braindates, but that, for example, like the top Braindater went on 15, and the second top Braindater went on 15, 14. The numbers kind of remained quite high. So I think that was a really great proof of concept, where it wasn't just like, okay, I did one, I'm done, thank you. It was like, oh wow, this is a huge value add. This is going to transform my experience of the event. Yeah. So from there, essentially, I think another kind of hurdle in the engagement kind of challenge is the concept of the mental shift from networking into collaborative learning is something of a culture shift. So it is helpful to have had basically like a first event, like a first iteration of an event under our belt, so that the attendees and participants are a bit more exposed to what the concept is generally, so that the next time around they're used to it, they're welcoming Braindates, they're ready for it, they know that it's as reliable as a keynote in terms of the piece of content that they're really looking forward to. So yeah, exactly. In this case, I know that we've been able to see that with this particular partner. So it was the first event that I went to myself on site, so it really stuck with me. But, yeah.
So in order for your service to work, the attendees have to download an app. Is that correct?
No, it's a web app. So actually you don't have
Web
to
app. Okay, web app. Okay.
But it allows us to connect and integrate easily with the app of the event. Because if you had to download 2 apps, that's friction.
That's exactly where I was going with that. Is that if you were bumping up against anything in the way of app fatigue, as people, because it's getting harder actually for people. We're starting to see dips. You know, we were getting increase on people downloading the mobile app. And now we're starting to see a little bit of a downward trend as people are just like, heck with it. I'm not gonna download another dedicated conference app. So that's what I was going to ask is, are you starting to bump into a little bit of that? But I would imagine by making it a web app, you're starting to reduce the friction like that. And you said it's embeddable as well?
Yeah. So we integrate. We have various points of integration with the existing technology of the event, and I think the fact that we have dedicated emails and a dedicated engagement strategy, most of the participants actually can reach the platform directly from those emails, but we still see a good engagement from the event technology itself. So. It's always the same thing, you know, like I've heard many times, oh, we want the participants to download the app. But what does that mean? You know, why would I download the app? Like that's something that you want as an event organizer to measure engagement, but actually in that message, download the app, there's no value in sight. As a participant, I have no idea why I should download the app. So for us, it was never about download our app. You know, it's always about like learn from the amazing people around you, and to do so, go and complete your profile. You know, it's just an of itself.
And sometimes you do download the app and you still wonder what the value was.
Yes.
After that, on some of them. Okay, so that's good. So you're able to, if I've already got my app picked out, you guys are able to come in and embed.
And I'll say that in my experience, it's because it's a challenge for our partners who are the technology providers as well. Our partnership specifically is kind of a fun incentive, a new opportunity to gamify event app use. Like it kind of introduces this whole other level of creativity. Our partnership definitely, includes lots of different stakeholders beyond just the host of the event. And so it does help to try to provide another level of meaning.
You mentioned the staff and the concierge, and I know we already talked a little bit about that, but I'm curious, is that on every event that you've got someone staffing it?
Yes, sir.
Nodding heads. All right, good. So all right, here's a curveball. So you've got someone there on staff, and the Wi-Fi goes down. Is there a way to kind of continue and muddle on? And what do you do in case of that eventuality?
Well, that never happens at events.
Never happens.
So I don't know how relevant your question is. We have different ways. It's a great question. We're actually, we're not fully, I would say, independent offline. So that's something that we're working on as a little nudge to my dev team here. But then we can connect with our own team. And it's kind of a bit of a backstage question, but we will see with our own data from the team here in Montreal, who are the people coming for the Braindate, so we can help them to still connect, because that's a big thing, is that you don't necessarily remember everybody that you should be meeting. So we want people to still be able to, connect with their upcoming Braindates, especially during the event. So our learning concierge will be there to guide people so that they can actually, even if Wi-Fi is down, make sure that they still connect with their upcoming brain dates. And then sometimes, we'll use our own data, like we'll do everything that we can so that people can actually use the product, at least here in the Braindate Lounge.
Well, and there's more and more that you can do with offline web pages these days. It used to be, if the internet went down, you couldn't access a web page anymore. But a lot of times now, once it's been cached once, you're able to continue to access that data and use that data. So the world is definitely opening up in that department. All right, we're starting to wind down toward the end of the show, but there's still like so much that we haven't even had a chance to talk about yet. But real quick, let's touch on one of the topics that's near and dear to my heart, and that is talking about digital security. Anytime we're dealing with matching people up and things like that, like you said, ultimately it winds up being the power is in the hands of the participant. But I think anytime we've got algorithms dealing with our interests and our personal information, people's hackles kind of get up. So how are you dealing with issues of cybersecurity? Do you have measures in place? What types of information are being collected from the participants? And those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. You are the super expert for that.
It's a great question and a fun 2018 question, and I'm really curious why that issue is really near and dear to your heart. But we are in GDPR terms of processor of data, so we don't own this information. We're working at the behest of the client, essentially, just to deliver our experience in such a way as they have promised it to their participants. So we essentially we don't have advertising, so we don't sell any information. Like everything is in house, and it's all just essentially between us, the participants, and the client. We put a lot of care into making sure that all of our policies are very accessible, very up to date, and we really do encourage people to actually read through them. But the important thing to know is that, more in terms of nitty gritty, we obviously had to implement things like new security audits and data breach policies, and have new components of all of our contracts, and that's very standard practice. So we've updated that, as is everybody else who deals with personal data in any way. But it is a different story, essentially, because this is a time bound and bound to the client, our relationship with the personal data.
And as being kind of a key part of GDPR, what happens to the data after the event?
Mm-hmm. So it's the property, as I mentioned, of the client. So it's essentially just shared with them and then removed or anonymized from our own backend.
All right. So the planner winds up with the information of who went on brain dates with whom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But beyond that, you're not hanging on to anything afterwards, huh?
No. We're not there for the conversation.
Okay.
We don't record any conversation.
Yes, it's all recorded. It's all yes.
I'm usually there in person with a microphone, just following people, poking them if they're too quiet, encouraging them to ask questions.
It's not true. Just for the record.
It's not.
GDPR, if you're listening. It's not true.
Well, that honestly is the key, right? There's an old saying, or I don't know how old it is, but it's certainly relevant in these times, that if you don't know what the product is you. That's or if you don't know what's being sold, the product is you. So it's good to hear that you're not really hanging on to that stuff, as that will help alleviate.
We do not want to hang on to that.
So what's next for you guys? I mean, what's kind of the next iteration of this technology? What are you guys working on in the pipeline? You can tell us. It's okay. It's just us. You don't need to, So what have you guys got cooking in the pipeline?
I'm just so excited about it. So, but there's many things, and I think two major things are a year-long engagement, year-long brain dates, virtual brain dates. So that's something we've been asked since we've started this work, how can you take your magic and make it last year long, and not just talk about it, but actually have a vibrant Braindate community year long. So that's something that we're launching early next year. And then, as I was saying, to bring back the product to its community offering as well, by just taking all the amazing knowledge and best practices that lies in the hearts and the souls of the learning concierge and the producers that we work with, and making this more available for any community leader to launch a successful Braindate experience for their members. So that's always our concern when you were asking, do you have learning concierge on site, at all events? We're really, I'm very demanding so that each time we deploy Braindates that we are successful, and we really believe that hosting that safe space and helping people to feel comfortable with Braindates and help them to get their own knowledge out, even if they think they have nothing to share, is a big part of our secret sauce. So anything that we do to bring the price point down will have to encompass a new way to automize that impact that we have on our clients. So that's also coming in 2019, smaller Braindate groups that can be hosted by community leaders with less involvement on the part of the learning concierge and producers of E180. And then the launch of a school. So yeah, I drive my team crazy with all those things.
We love it.
It's happening.
That's why we're here.
Well, tell us, you can't just drop that. Tell us a little bit more about the launch of the school.
Well, we're all about self-directed, collaborative, experiential learning. We believe that humans should be sovereign on their own learning, and that's something that we try and bring to our clients as well. Because we really see events as learning spaces for adults, and the work that we do help adults to be more self-directed in the way that they will learn at an event. So that's something that was my first project when I did my master's, and I ended up in technology. And I promised to myself that I would open the school or the schools when my daughters would go to school. And now they're 2 months old and 3.5. So it's happening. It has to happen. So it will be a school that I hope will be very radically different from what we know, and rooted in the interest and the sovereignty of children, rooted in their community. So basically what we've been doing for 7 years was just to be passionate about something and learn by doing and by building amazing projects. So that's what I want in that school.
So again, small goals, just tiny little things, like completely re-engineering the education system. Little things like that. All right, before we move on to our final couple of questions, real quick, you guys are probably on a lot of events. Is there anything else that you're seeing out there as far as networking systems, event apps, things like that, event technology that you're like, wow, that's pretty cool?
Yeah, I think I'm forever personally, to your interest in personal data, my personal interest is in beacons and how that works, how people give their consent for things like that. So this is more of a kind of lingering question mark that I have when I am regarding the future of event technology. We have a great collection of event apps and different kind of registration platforms and whatnot that we collaborate with a couple of folks that are here. And I think you guys had Click, or a couple of people from some of our partner organizations that were recent guests as well on the podcast. But that's just when I'm asking myself questions about what the heck is 2018 really, is this happening? I think about beacons. So yeah, that's me.
What I'm excited about is not technology related. I think most technology is not at a point where it's exciting yet, I think. I'm really excited about alternative experiences at events, and things that are not necessarily expensive to put together, but really giving back the power to the participants and focusing on their own learning goals and making the experience as curated and relevant for every single one of them. And that includes, small group dinners. Airbnb Open was doing that, basically bringing like kind of intimacy and meaningful connection in a smaller sense, getting people to work during the event. So not always thinking people will work once they go back, but why don't we make more room? We always want to cram more content in an event. I say remove the content, add space, add silence, add a moment where people can do sense making while they're at the event. So all these new ways of thinking about structuring, I would say, the rhythm of an event, I think are really promising.
I'm so with you on that. We need time to be able to absorb this stuff. And it drives me nuts when we go to these conferences where it is just nonstop to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. You need to give people just a minute to go back to their rooms and kick their shoes off and think about what they just saw for like 2 minutes before they have to go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
All right. So if you could pick only one, we'll give each of you an opportunity to answer this question. But if you could pick only one, what is your one tip for event planners? It could be related to networking. It could be beyond that, beyond the scope.
Something that I kind of think about, or that's a framing concept for me, and speaks to my own experience with how I met these guys, which was on Braindates myself at C2. When I was on my first Braindates, I had gotten a ticket to this legendary conference really last minute, and I was like, I've really made it, I'm going, and then was like, oh, I'm so alone. I'm not going with anybody from my company. What the heck am I going to do here? And then it felt like when I kind of began to experience Braindates that the power dynamics had flipped, and that all of a sudden me as a, early 20s have not really a great idea of what I want to do with my life. I was able to access founders of companies and festivals and artists that I never would have been able to meet. And so to me, the piece of advice I think that speaks to is really don't underestimate the power of the participants themselves as the most meaningful source of content for an event. And if you are able to help your participants to tap into their own agency and help them to feel autonomous rather and important, I think that that's an impression that will last hopefully forever.
Kristine?
I would say,
what's your one tip?
Yeah, I would say to focus on curating the learning experience and the learning journey and let the participants curate their own content. That's my piece of advice.
All right. Boom. Mic drop. Way you go. All right. So wait till you guys.
If you don't know how to do that.
whenever we ask folks for resources, sometimes we get like one thing. And that didn't happen this time. So we asked you guys for resources, and wait till you see it, folks. So don't forget, go to event-icons.com. That's where we publish these about a week or so after they're recorded, because these gals have put in probably 30 book resources as far as books that they recommend. So not a lot of time to get through all of them right now, but just know that after this episode, you're going to have a massive block of book recommendations, magazine recommendations. We want to send people to your blog. So it looks like WeSeek, medium.com/WeSeek is the location for that. Other books in here, we've got Tribes by Seth Godin. That's always a pretty popular one. One of the ones that I've read before and can also recommend is Thinking Fast and Slow. That's a great book, just to kind of understand how the mind works and how we make make decisions in our lives. But yeah, so lots of good stuff in here. We'll leave it to the listener, as they say, to peruse this list. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. It's already amazing how fast, as always, the hour goes by. If people want to find out more about about E180 and what you guys are up to, is the blog the best place? Where can people find out more?
You can definitely go on www.e180altogether.co or braindate.com, or definitely contact us, and it's going to be a real pleasure to talk with them.
So it's e180.co.
That's right.
Okay.
And we also have a video, I think, that represents amazingly the impact and the work we do. So I don't know what is the best way to share to share that weird Vimeo link with your audience.
If you want to drop it in the doc, we'll make sure it gets published along with everything else. So absolutely, we will get that on there.
It's bit.ly/meetbraindate.
bit.ly/meetbraindate. All right, there you go, everybody. So you can check it out for yourselves and find out. So thank you guys so much for coming. It's Kristine Renaud, CEO and co-founder of E180, and Sophie Silkes, Marketing and Communications Director of E180. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
All right, and thank you all for joining us out there as well. We want to remind you that Event Icons is recorded live each Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You can watch behind the scenes on Facebook Live. The show is then released the following Tuesday on iTunes, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, or whatever you like to use for your favorite podcast app. And of course, event-icons.com. That is the best way to watch the show. You get the show notes, you get the links, you get the resources shared, you get the chat if you're joining us live. So you can get in there like Reed and Nicole and some of the other folks that were in there joining us live there at event-icons.com. We want to know what you think, so use the hashtag EventIcons on Twitter or join the Event Icons Facebook group and let us know what you want, who you want, which icons you want to see on the show. And we will definitely see what we can do about getting them on. We've got some great people, some great guests coming up as we look forward into the end of 2018, and the beginning of 2019 is already starting to book. So really excited by what's coming up on the show. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Event Icons.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #EventIcons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway.
And join the social conversation. Sponsored by Little Bird Told Media.
Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.